Thank you for Patreon now for donating to the Patreon.
Hey guys, it's Vandy Azul, back in our Card Fight Vanguard deck profile. So if you guys enjoyed the come subscribe and watch how we show you. Today we have Mythiarq for Stoicheia set 11. So first up, before we get started, remember these builds are not meant to be optimal. They're just meant to be a balanced version of fun. If you have a different build that's fun for you, go ahead and go with that one. If you have a different one that's optimal and that's also fun for you, go with that one. But I'm just doing this for fun. And then also, I'm still sick. So if I sound like I'm dying during this, I am dying during this. So let's go and get this started, shall we? Mythiarq all around is an interesting line. Here's a fun fact about Mythiarq. Before the deck actually came out, we got a promo for Mythiarq without knowing it was going to be a riot line, so take that as you will. Anyways, let's go get the start, shall we, and see what we got. First of today, we have Mythiarq this is, of course, the best way to start this morning. Pegilio Meko, Grade 0 boost, 5k shield, 6k base, autumn upon if you win second draw card, damage draw, not about it. You just get a free draw if you win second, and look at it, it's so cute. It's like the crossbreed of, like, I don't know, in my mind, this is a penguin. I know it's not a penguin, but, like, a penguin and a dolphin, because look at it, it has, like, the little heart in its chest, and it has, like, the cute triangle ears and the nose. It's just so cute. Anyways, you don't really need this as your starter, but, come on, you're gonna go for the full line, and this one's cute enough to be decent enough to be a starter. So, Mythiarq, Pegilio Meko is our starter. Then we have Overtrigger and Source Dragon Deity of Blessings Blessfavor. Grid 0 boost, 50k shield, 5k power, Overtrigger. You may only have one Overtrigger in your deck. When revealed as a trigger the card, draw a card, choose my mix, up to the turn. And if you revealed it during draft check, activate its additional effect, which you can draw a card, choose and review, it gets +1 crit for the turn, and then all your farm you get plus 10k power. And then if your damage zone has the same number of cards as your opponents or more, choose a card from your damage zone and heal it. All around, pretty solid. It gets you a guaranteed draw in a million, whether you damage check it or drive check it. Then when you drive check it, you get an additional draw, so a total of 2 draws. Someone on your board gets a crit, probably the Vanguard if that's hidden. Someone gets the front row gets +10, and then you get a possible heal trigger out of it. All around Blessfavor is one of my favorites because it literally is an everything bagel, and it's so fun pulling because the second you do pull this, while it may not be an instant win depending on what the situation is, it makes it a lot harder for your opponent to kill you. So Blessfavor is one of my favorite overtriggers. I like running it. You can run Bona or Easphoria, the one that bounces stuff to hand. I still don't know what his name is. I should probably check that before I keep saying it. But I prefer to run the actual nation over triggers in their own respective nations. So one of Blessfavor for me, but you can run the other overs if you want to. Then we have our normal triggers. First, we run 3 crits, Inspiring Maiden Alana. Grade 0 boost, 15k shield, 4k power, critical trigger, all real damage. At the end of the battle, boosted, put this unit to soul, choose remix, up to 2k for the turn. All around, pretty solid. Like, it gets you soul, which sometimes is a problem if you run into certain units more than others. And it also gives 2k, which doesn't make much of a difference except in one specific situation that actually won me the match. So Alana all around is actually useful because for once the 2k kind of comes in helpful, and it does get soul if you do choose to call it to board, and that is also very helpful as well. So 3 of Alana for that. You don't need a lot of them because you are going to want like the higher base power for attacking, but it's nice to have her for 3 ofs. Then we have 4 copies of Dual Pressure Dragon, Grade 0 boost, 50k shield, 5k power. You know, in a multi-attack deck, why not run crits? It adds pressure. Like, you can make the same arguments for running fronts, which by the way we don't run, but yeah, just, I don't know, I feel like crits do better in this deck. If you want to run fronts, go ahead, but I've had better experience with these guys. And then we have 4 draw triggers in Serene, Maiden, and Lena. Grade 0 boost, 5k shield, 4k base, continues guard circle. If your opponent's Vanguard's a grade 3 guard, she equips a 5k shield. So all around pretty solid. She's a 10k shield, she can defend you pretty easily. She's also a draw trigger, so she helps increase your hand in a deck that wants hand cards to call to rear guard. It's pretty important to have draw triggers. So 4 of Lena, she's really nice. She combos well just with like how the entire deck wants units into hand. If only she didn't make me consistently draw normal units, because while that's nice, I also need defensive power, but what can you do? 4 of Lena. Then we have our 4 regular heals in Elegy Pixy. Grade 0 boost, 15k shield, 5k power. Every time I read the phrase Elegy Pixy, I can now only think of Flowery Tone, the heal trigger from Leonord, because for those of you that don't know about this, when I first was putting Leonord into tabletop and I had grabbed Flowery Tone, I forgot to change its name. So for the longest time, it was labeled as Elegy Pixy, and honest to God, that sounds what it looks like. And when I eventually figured out that wasn't its name, I was so mad that I've been calling it that for so long. And now I can only see Flowery Tone whenever I say the words Elegy Pixy and vice versa. But either way though, Elegy Pixy is just a solid heal. It's a grade 0 boost, 50k shield, 5k power. It has no effects. I don't really like the effect heals too much because, you know, they're 10k shields most of the time and only 25k shields in very specific situations. And I'd rather have a consistent 15k shield than a fluctuating 10 and 25. But if you want to run the effect heals, go ahead. But I do prefer my normal heals at 4. Then move on to our grade 1. First, we're on 3 copies of Viewpre Stinger. Grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base. Literally, the only words why he's here is because there was space and I didn't know what to put. So I just was like, you know what? Screw it. Let's try out the Blitz order cards because at this point I don't care. So, 2 skills. Continues rear guard during your turn. If your drop zone has 2 or more Blitz orders in it, it gets plus 5k power. That ability rarely goes off. Mainly because, not because it's impossible to do that, but because I actively kill him before I get to 2 more Blitz orders. In all of the games I've played with this deck, that ability has only ever gone off once, and that same turn I killed it. So, like, it never really gets to do anything. And then auto, when it's placed on Rearguard Circle, by counterblasting 1, search your deck or drop zone for up to 1 Sweet Honey Garden, reveal it, put it to your hand, and if you search your deck, you shuffle it. All around pretty solid. It can fetch orders from, specifically the Blitz order, from drop or a deck, which is great because it gives a little bit of defensive power. The 1 CB is not that bad. In fact, it kind of, especially the timing I get this card at, it leads towards countercharging combos to where I'm not using up too much of my CB at once, and in fact, it's more of a benefit to use it. All around Viewpre Stingers, which is all grade 1. It searches for orders, it gets numbers off it. The only downside is, after he's placed, I tend to kill him either the following turn or the exact same turn, so the second ability never gets to go off, but I mean, he's still good for what he is, so why not run him as a 3 of? Then we run 3 copies of Decked Out Hamster? Question mark? Mythiarq Usa Zastar. This thing looks like a pit boss. Like, it has the wine, it has, like, the poofy jacket, you can see, like, the chain, and then like, the shirt. I don't know, it just looks like, especially, like, the chair, too. This is a pit boss, if I've ever seen one. Grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base, auto rear guard. When this unit boosts a unit with Mythiarq in his card name, if your damage has 3 or more face-down cards, and you do not countercharge this turn, countercharge 1. Cool. That's very nice, you know. Granted, you can't countercharge for the entirety of the turn beforehand, but it's a free countercharge if you have a Mythiarq Vanguard, regardless of who it boosts, or actually, it doesn't even have to have a Mythiarq Vanguard, it's just to boost a Mythiarq unit, and then if you're damaged on after 3 more face-down cards, which is why Viewpre is helpful, because he tends to allow me to hit the 3 CB on my first grade 3 turn if I'm not doing the heavy draw combo plan. So then Mythiarq, Usa Zatar here can easily make it so I only pay 2 CB that turn to get a Blitz order to my hand. All around, very nice grade 1. I like his skill a lot. Easy 3-up for me, and it keeps the CB in check. Weirdly enough, this card is the sole reason why I don't have a CB problem, even though you can only use it once per turn. Pretty nice. Then we have 4 PGs in Custodial Dragon, grade 1 boost, 0/6 base, contains suddenly you have to in deck on its opponent guard circle. Choose one unit, it cannot be hit on battle. If your hand is true, mark cards, choose cards from start it. Standard PG. Next special basically means if this only card you place on the guard circle, you don't have to discard, which is great, because that means you can be as aggressive as you want in the early game, which is something this deck does want to do, because you want to have at least 3 units on your board, not counting the Vanguard, before you go. Well, technically, at that point, if you are counting the Vanguard, then you only need 2 rear guards, but you're going to want to have at least 3 units on board, unless your opponent's playing a nuke deck, then call your entire hand, because fuck it, to, you know, rush your opponent with and to set up for the grade 3, and then when your opponent counterattacks you, Custodial Dragon can be there to defend you. All around, very nice PG. The sad thing is, the way this deck works is I will never be in that situation because my hand has just enough to not rely on that PG, and then when we get to the point where that would have been helpful, my hand is clouded with a bunch of 5Ks. Thanks for that one, Lena. So, 4 Custodial Dragon. All around solid PG. You can run Planet Prevent because they do the exact same thing, but I prefer Custodial Dragon because it is closer to the time of Mythiarq's release in terms of who was released earliest. So, 4 Custodial Dragon. Then we have our last grade 1. Grade 1, 1 copy in the ride deck, 3 copies in the main deck. Finally, a really good ride deck card. Mythiarq Ilodrina. I definitely butchered that. And the only thing I could see in this is a platypus, and I made the joke in the Island Vanity. I would 100% play Parry the Platypus theme right now if I could, and if I wasn't afraid of copyright. Grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base. Auto was wrote upon by a grade 2 card with Mythiarq in its card name. Call this card to a rearguard circle. I love how it doesn't specify what Mythiarq, it just specifies a grade 2 Mythiarq. So, technically speaking, budget-wise, if you have to run the budget, well, not even budget grade 2. Technically, the budget grade 2 is more expensive. But, like, if you can't afford the actual ride deck grade 2, as long as you can afford the other Mythiarq grade 2, you can place that in the ride deck and it'll still proc up this thing skill. And then auto backward rear guard circle. If your other rear guard with Mythiarq in his card name was placed by your unit's ability this turn, and your Vanguard's a grade 3 or greater, your front or rear guard in the same comments unit gets plus 5k power. All around pretty solid because it doesn't require the Vanguard to be a Mythiarq, it just requires the Vanguard to be a grade 3 or greater, and it's just the unit that was placed by abilities this turn has to be a Mythiarq. All around, pretty solid. I love Ilodrina's effect. It gives power, it helps with multi-attack because if you have to boost with it, most likely the unit that you are calling in place of it, because again, it's called by Mythiarq, so therefore we get plus 5k power. It'll at least make the multi-attack a little bit easier, because unless the opponent sees a trigger, it's still going to hit. So 3 of in the main deck, 1 of in the ride deck of Elegy. It's a really nice card to fill out the back row. Sad news is it doesn't do anything in back row center, but it's still pretty solid to have. Then we have our grade 2s. We run 3 copies of the Blitz Order that's searched by this thing, so in total we have 6 copies of it, technically. And that is Sweet Honey Garden. Grade 2 Blitz Order played by Soul Blasting 1. Choose whenever you use, it gets plus 15k for the battle, and if your drop zone has a Blitz Order, and it gets 25k instead of 15. Oh my god, it only requires 1 Blitz Order and drop for that skill. I thought it required 3. I thought it required all 3 to be in drop, and I was like, okay, well, I'm never going to be able to pull that off. Turns out you only need the 1, which is great, because that means it's a 25k shield after you play it once. All you have to do is use 1 instance of it. Boom, it's a 25k shield afterwards. Until then, it's just a standard 15, but all around pretty solid, because being a 15k shield for only the cost of a Soul Blast, granted, it will sometimes lead to a Soul Blast problem in the deck, but being a 15k shield is nice to have for small pokes, and then, you know, once it actually hits the 25k shield, aka once you're not me and you realize it only requires 1 order and drop to do that ability, then it becomes pretty solid, because it's more or less a 1 to 2 to pass on a Vanguard, depending on how big that Vanguard is, and then also it shuts down almost every other attack unless those attacks are somewhere in the 40s. So 3 of Sweet Honey Garden, solid Blitz Order. What's not to like about it? It's just nice to have, and again, it is searchable by this one grade 1. Then we have 4 copies of Mythiarq Miralin. I'm just going to call it Merlin because that's much easier to pronounce. Great Genius at 5k shield, 10k base. This is a crossbreed between a giraffe and a sea turtle, right? I'm not crazy. Everyone else sees this. Auto, when it's placed on rearguard circle, if you have 3 or more uses of Mythiarq in their card names, it gets with 5k power for the turn. Then, by Soul Blasting 1, choose an opponent's rearguard, and that unit cannot stand during your opponent's next stand phase. Okay, why? Like, cool, first up, great. On plays, as long as you have 3 other actually, no, not even 3 other, because it counts itself. As long as you have 3 Mythiarq units, so the Vanguard is probably one of them, this is probably one of them, so all you need is 1 more rearguard. He'll get a free 5k, and then if you wanted to, you could Soul Blast 1 and just and prevent a unit from standing next turn. I question why they gave this to a rearguard. Like, preventing a rearguard from standing just by being placed in a deck that doesn't do anything to stop your opponent from standing, it feels so out of place. Don't get me wrong, the skill is good because it forces your opponent to either kill the rearguard next turn of their own accord, or basically find a way to use it up because they've lost the ability to either attack or get a really good boost out of it. But it just feels so unfitting for a deck that does nothing else that related to that ability, but whatever. And then act rearguard circle, the thing that makes this ability broken. Once per turn, if you have a grade 3 Vanguard, or grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Mythiarq in its card name, bind a rearguard with Mythiarq in its different card name from this unit, so everything else in this deck that's a Mythiarq, and call the card bound for the cost to rearguard. So, for free, you can auto-trigger this unit's ability, but also, because it's a continuous ability, so once it happens once, it's going to trigger the rest of the turn. Or, you can trigger off other on-place abilities of Mythiarqs. Right now, we only have 1 other Mythiarq that has an on-place ability, and actually, we have 2 that have on-place abilities, and that is very good. This grade 2, off of this 1 line of text alone, does so much. They could have just not included this skill, or if they wanted to, they could just not include this part of this skill, and then have just kept this thing, and this ability would still be broken. Because that is for free. No discard, no Soul Blast, no Counter Blast. It is just a free bind a different named Mythiarq rearguard, call it to rearguard, trigger this thing's effect, and then possibly trigger the on-place effects of the Mythiarq. 4 of Mirror Moonland in the ride deck. Or not ride deck, sorry, in the main deck. Very powerful grade 2. I don't know what they were thinking about this skill, but clearly they knew what they were doing about this one. 4 of. Then we have the ride deck grade 2 and the last grade 2. 1 of in the ride deck, 3 of in the main deck of Mythiarq Lulusmanta. Grade 2 instead 5k shield, 10k base. Okay, let's just guess what this one is a crossbreed of. I'm guessing all these are like, except for this one, I'm guessing all these are like crossbreeds of dolphins and something else. I'm gonna say this is a dolphin and a manta ray. Just because it kind of looks like it. And then again, like the wings on its head say otherwise. Anyways, auto is put, when it's rode upon by a grade 3 Mythiarq, its card name calls card to rearguard circle. Literally the exact same thing as the grade 1 over here, just difference is it's a grade 3, not a grade 2. But pretty solid that again, if you can't afford the main grade 3, as long as you can afford the budget grade 3, it'll still proc off the skill. And then auto, when it's placed on rearguard circle, if you have 3 or more units of Mythiarq in their card names, including itself. So, you know, the second you call this from the Vanguard being placed, you already have a guaranteed 2, and if you have 1 rearguard, then 3. 3, which is nice. You may soul charge one, so it's not a mandatory soul charge, but you may soul charge. I'm gonna give you a hint right now, you probably will, because this thing will lead to soul boss problems along with this thing. Then choose one of your opponent's rear guards that cannot intercept on a turn. Okay. That's good and all. Free soul charge, that's not mandatory, can lock down intercept, that's fine. But why are we getting two? Because I'm telling you this right now, the main grade 3 does nothing like this. Why are we getting 2 cards that are like Mega Colony based skills, like lockdown intercepts and lockdown standing? Like, why? It doesn't make sense. It feels like they had the abilities, but they're like, we need more. We need something more to give these things, what's the word I'm looking for? Flair. And they just were like, screw it, let's just give them lockdown abilities, because I don't know why. Like, don't get me wrong, they're fine, but when it's only 2 random grade 2s that it feels like have that ability, it feels like it's not necessary for them to give them it, but whatever. 3 of them in the main deck, 1 of them in the right deck of Lutsu Manta. Very soft for soul charging, and it does lock down intercept for free, so there's no reason not to really run it, so take that as you will. Then move on to our grade 3s. We run 4 copies of Mythiarq Alpuril. Grade 3, 10 drive persona at 13k base, auto placed on rearguard circle. If you have 3 or more units with Mythiarq in their card names, this unit gives 5k power for the turn. Then by counterblasting 1, you get to draw a card. All around, pretty solid. It's a guaranteed 18k base just by being placed, again, with 3 or more Mythiarqs. Again, it counts itself. The Vanguard's probably one of them, so 2. And then you just have to have literally anything else on the board. Probably this thing, and or this thing, to make it 3. And then by counterblasting 1, you get a draw out of it, which is nice. And that's kind of like the combo of this deck. You call this, because it can be called by any means, whether it's by normal or by, like, superior called, it will still proc off the ability. So, you hard call this the first time, or use the Vanguard skill to call it out, and we'll get to the main Vanguard in a second. Use its skill, get 5k in a draw, then you use this thing skill, because it can bind any rear guard, doesn't matter the grade, as long as it's a Mythiarq. Bind a Pyro, call it back, do it again, so CB1 again to draw a card in 5k. Then you go into your battle phase, swing with it, swing with this thing, I guess, and then swing with the Vanguard, bounce this to hand, call something, one of these 2 lockdown intercepts or stands, and then make sure you boost one of them with Uzatar here, who will make it so that you only CB2 that turn, even though technically you CB3. All around, it's very solid. It's not name restricted for his draws. He can lead to some fun hand card increases, and I like using this card. So 4 of Alpuril, just a nice grade 3. Then we have our last card in the deck, 3 of in the main deck, 1 of in the right deck of Mythiarq, Luluzul. Luluzul. That's how you say it. Cool. I didn't believe it. That's why I had to take a short pause on that, just to make sure. I mean, no, it is Luluzul. No, I was saying it right. Okay, cool. Anyways, grade 3, 10% at 13k base. Autumn was placed on Vanguard Circle. Look at the top 7 cards of your deck. Choose a 1 grade 3 less unit card from among them. Call it the rear guard and shuffle the deck. And then if you have 5 or more units, your opponent chooses a card from the hand discarded. Okay, first up, yes. There we go. I'm not gonna lie to you, this is actually the reason why I was invested into like this deck before it was released, because when we saw like the small teaser of it from the, I think it's Youthquake that this thing is from, the Youthquake manga or whatever it's from, that we saw like it discarding a card from the opponent's hand. That's why I was interested in this thing, and not gonna lie, I'm kind of disappointed knowing what the rest of the deck does, but I mean it's still fun because top 7 searches by being placed for free. Literally call anything. It's not name restricted at all. It's choose up to any grade 3 or less unit card from among them, regardless if it's a Mythiarq or not. Call it to rear guard, and then if you have 5 or more units, including itself, so the Vanguard, plus this thing possibly, so 2, plus possibly this thing as well, so 3, plus the thing you just called, so 4. So literally just have 1 more unit, and your opponent is forced to discard 1. You don't even need a full board, you need mostly a full board, which is great. It's a free discard on your opponent, and it does all of that for free, which is nice. And then auto Vanguard Circle, when this unit attacks into a Vanguard, by counterblasting 1, choose one of your rear guards with Mythiarq in its card name, bounce it to hand, and then choose up to 1 unit card with Mythiarq in its different card name from the card returned by this effect to your hand and call it to rear guard. I'm assuming the reason why it's like that is because they don't want you bouncing this back to hand and then calling it back and then immediately using its skill to soul boss 1 to lock down 2 from more units from standing, but also I could see it being this reason. Like, this one isn't broken. It nullifies an intercept. Granted, nullifying intercept, depending on what deck it is very bad, but I mean, it's not the greatest ability. Nullifying stand, on the other hand, is also annoying, and getting a bunch of draws with a card that granted only has 1 countercharger, but a countercharger that does its job really well, that can also lead to other counterchargers like Tearful Malice. Yeah, I mean, well, then again, Tearful Malice only will countercharge beforehand, but you get the point. Like, it's still all around a very solid grade 3. It gets multi-attack only for the cost of counterblast 1. It has one of the best on-place abilities I've ever seen. It does feel a little bit naff. Like, there could have been more, because it feels like there's no synergy between this and these two who have random, like, nullification skills, but all around, still very solid. Force a possible discard, gets a board very easily, and it can cause multi-attack, all of us, and cost of a counterblast. What's not to like about Luluzu? Grade 3, 3 copies, 1 of in the ride deck, 3 of in the main deck, and it's also just beautiful, and I think this is a crossbreed of a dolphin and a dragon, because I cannot think of another animal that would be a crossbreed of. And that's it for the deck. I hope you guys enjoyed. All around, this deck is very fun to play. Don't get me wrong. It's nice being able to multi-attack like nothing else in D. Because, yeah, no other deck in D multi-attacks by bouncing stuff to hand. Kyrie. But, you know, it's nice. It's just interesting that we have cards that also nullify intercepts and standing at the same time. But it is fun to have Counterblast 5k draw card spammers. It's nice to have that too. And I am glad I get to test these 2 cards out in this deck, because it's actually fun being able to search the order. And now that I know it only requires 1 in drop zone, I'm going to go abuse the hell out of that. So, I hope you guys enjoyed. I'm Andy here. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, don't go follow Twitch, and I'll see you all in the next one. Don't forget to end up your vanguards.